Well, a very good evening to you, or good morning, good afternoon, wherever you might be in the world. Here in Western Australia, Perth, which is where I'm at, it's actually early afternoon. If you're new to the channel, you might not be aware that I am Anah and Lorena's Labyrinth is my baby. And I'm interested in crystals from a layperson's perspective and from a metaphysical perspective. I used to sell them many years ago, and I've been involved in energy work for a long time. Where I'm going with this, though, is that I started the Crystal Magicke channel because I became aware, as part of sharing information, that a lot of people were being scammed online, basically. And initially, the idea was to redirect people to go back to the actual wholesalers, to go into the shops and to handle the crystals so that they can be drawn to them. And then part of the motivation for doing this particular playlist is actually about informing and educating people where to find a verifiable source for purchasing. Anyway, whether you're new or a returning visitor, I say thank you, welcome back if that applies to you. And today we're going to be talking about a crystal, Mookaite, where I share with you some of the learning that I have made over the last couple of days and my understandings also of the energy of Mookaite and how we can actually use it from a metaphysical perspective. I think it's a very understated and underrated crystal, shall we say. And in fact, I would go as far as saying that it's very affordable, which I find very surprising. But I'm going to talk about that more as we go through the video. Let's take a look at let's just take a look right from the beginning, because I'm changing my approach for this video as compared to the normal videos I load. This time I'm actually going to be looking at the mineral perspective first before we go into the metaphysical properties of the crystal. So I've known about Mookaite for a long time. I'm going to explain this image in a moment. Many years ago when I used to sell it, it was quite popular within the, my friend had a business where he used to wholesale and retail crystals from, and Mookaite was quite popular there. Really, I mean, not hugely popular, because I think a lot of people weren't aware about it and the properties, as I say. So anyway, as I'm rebuilding my collection and buying content for my own purposes here, when I launched my retail shop, I thought, I must get some Mookaite. And I struggled to find what I considered to be an affordable source locally, which is a surprise to me, because I'm very aware of the fact that Mookaite is a West Australian crystal, if we want to call it that. I'll call it a crystal. Some people call it a rock or whatever, but for my purposes, I'm going to call it a crystal. Anyway, that surprised me, because I was able to buy it from China cheaper than I was able to buy it locally, and I'm talking about buying stocks to on-sell as well. So earlier this year, I was looking for photographs of Mookaite because I'd got my tumbled stones in, and I stumbled across this particular image here, and a whole heap of them actually. I found the website. Now what we're looking at here is an image of Glenn. When I first saw this image, and the images that he's got on his website, which, by the way, I'm not being paid to promote this website or Glenn's business himself, I was just looking at the crystals, and I was so enamored by what I saw, I was absolutely blown away, that I thought, okay, this guy's a prospector. And I used to interact with prospectors many years ago, and of course I've lost touch with them over time. I'm talking about 2005, 2006. I used to know a lot of them in Kalgoorlie, which is a mining town. So bearing in mind that I'm trying to find sources and suppliers of crystals, with a view to the future, this seemed like a perfect connection for me to make. So I didn't actually read the content on his website. What I did was I flicked him an email, because I could see that there were some products for sale, and there were some very nice ones, I might add. So I sent him a message and was like, just connecting with you. I'm interested in your items, and I'd like to come back at some point in time, which this is where we've actually gone with this. So a bit of background information here. We'll go on from this. First of all, I'll introduce you basically to the gentleman in the photograph. His name is Glenn Archer, and I do have permission to use his photograph. And isn't that some amazing specimens? Here you actually see a large slab of the broken Mookaite, and you see him sitting on it in the rough on the ground. This is the stuff that he collects and obviously processes and sells. Now, I should make the point in the distinction that when we buy our tumbles, because Mookaite is such an interesting crystal, you don't often see it, as we saw in the previous image, with all the lines and all the rest of it in its natural form. And it was when I saw that image that I actually recognised I had that light bulb moment, if you like, where this is Rainbow Serpent stuff, okay? But I wasn't sure. That was just my gut instinct, let's be real. But in the process of preparing the content for this video, what I did was I thought, you know what, I'm going to get some map images here so that people can see. So on this map, what you're looking at here, I've put the two up so that you can get a better idea, because it turns out I'm actually right about the Rainbow Serpent, okay? Mookaite gets its name because it is located at a place called Mooka Creek. I'll explain the Rainbow Serpent to you in a little while. Okay, we'll come to that. I'm based in Perth. As you can see, that red dot there is Mooka Creek. So you can actually see that that's probably, I don't know, hazarding a guess, that's probably about 1,000 kilometre. Pretty close to it, really, from Perth. Okay, that's where the creek bed is. And either way, we would actually call that, as Australians and Aussies, we would say that's in the back of Beyond, or Beyond the Black Stump, or we would just go, you know, it's out in the middle of Whoop Whoop, is another terminology that we would use. Now, Mooka is not a town, all right? It is a creek. Okay, that doesn't show so easily here, but this is why I've enlarged this, so that you can actually see that Mooka Creek actually is so small it doesn't even show up on the map. So it would probably be dry. I'd have to ask Glenn about this, but I would imagine that Mooka Creek is dry most of the year, and it's only during the rains or the wet season or whatever that they might get some rainfall, run down Mooka Creek towards the bigger river, which of course that's the blue lines. So Mooka Creek is a tributary, if that's how you pronounce the word. I'm having a moment. I'm having a tongue-twisted moment. So anyway, based on that, I thought, oh my gosh, gee, I'm almost 100% sure we're talking about Rainbow Serpent energy here from a metaphysical perspective. So I'm kind of crossing over here. For those of you that don't know, this is cultural significance for Aboriginal people. We're talking about Aboriginal Dreamtime myths and legends, and I think that's got great relevance when we're talking about the metaphysical properties of Mookaite. So let's talk a little bit about the Rainbow Serpent, and I have to put this disclaimer up there straight from the get-go, which is that I am not Aboriginal, I'm not Indigenous. The Indigenous culture is one that you can't speak about our stuff unless you're one of us, so to speak. We can't talk about other people's belief systems and that. So I'm not going to speak about this specifically from any one Aboriginal group, because there are a lot of them. I'm just going to go off some information that I got from a website. I actually have had conversations with Aboriginal folk up north about the rainbow spirit and learned from the locals up there, but that's a different demographic to what we've got. Mooka Creek's nearest town is Carnarvon, which is about 180 kilometres away. So they are, to put into perspective, I guess we're talking about not so much the entirety of Europe, shall we say, but within the European continent, you get a lot of different countries, different cultures, different languages and that kind of thing. And it is the same thing for the Aboriginal folk. So, but there are shared aspects within that European culture as well. And the Rainbow Serpent is one of them. So going back to the serpent, and what this actually means is that the Rainbow Serpent is associated with water. We are talking about Mooka being a creek, okay? And this is where it's sourced from. So this is relevant. Anyway, the serpent embodies destruction and the natural forces of water in combination with the land. I'm sorry, I'm going to have a little bit of a cough. Now, before researching Mookaite, I must state that the Aboriginal conversations I had in the past were on the coast and a little town called Cossack, which has got an inlet. So my belief until I was doing this was that rainbow spirit was associated only with the inlets where the water, you know, the river mouths, where the land water meets the ocean. But through researching this video, I've learned it's actually not just about the river mouths, it's actually about creeks, waterholes, and all the rest of it. Anywhere there's considered to be a body of water is the potential for the Rainbow Serpent to be there. And he acts as a guardian and a protector. I say he. Okay, it is believed that this association is directly related, I'm going to my notes here, to the conduct of humans, their moods, and when all is well, Rainbow Serpent will sustain that. However, when things start to go awry, shall we say, then he acts as a destroyer. Basically, if people's behaviour becomes toxic, he'll bring in storms and lightning as part of cleansing the landscape or as punishment to people that have disobeyed the law. I use this image here because of the colours that are associated with this. And just to make a point here, you can see here that the artist is Michael J. Connor. He's an Aboriginal from one of the New South Wales mobs. They don't call them tribes, they call them mobs in Australia. And I've put down where you can actually find that image. And the reason why I've used this image is look at the colourings that you see here. Okay, so anyway, the information that I got from their website is that the Dreamtime stories are a belief across all Australian Aboriginal tribes people, mobs. They have different ways of describing it. They have different application of what the serpent means to them, and they may have different laws across their lands. What have I got written here? But within all of their interpretations, there is this association with the water. I did see on one website, I must say, and I find this interesting, that some people find the Rainbow Serpent myths or stories to be scary. I would have thought that that relates to the myths of the Bunyip, okay, because there is another story of the Bunyips, and the website that I found said that the Bunyip theories and beliefs are only to do with the state of Victoria in Australia. Now, I know that's not correct because I've spoken to Aboriginal people in Western Australia who have warned me off certain water pools, saying that there's bunyips that live in there and that Aboriginal folk won't go and visit it because the bunyip might get them. Now, putting this into perspective, the bunyip is associated with people drowning. So if you've got people drowning in waterholes, it stands to reason that people will actually blame the bunyip for it as a warning to anybody else to be very careful when they go to those areas. But generally speaking, I don't know of any specific group beyond that one that I saw online saying that the Rainbow Serpent was a bit scary because basically he's believed, I think, across all of the cultures to be a guardian of water sources and a giver of life and a protector of the land. And I would say nurturing as well, actually. So back to this image of Glenn and another image of Mookaite in the ore form, if you like, and how it gets sold. There is a potential space for controversy about the mining of this particular rock, shall we say. For me, when I first was looking at it and researching the history, I was a little bit surprised that Glenn could go in there. And just to be clear, Glenn's not the only one that's got a mining lease. There are two other people that have got mining leases to remove Mookaite. Because to me, when I look at Mookaite and I think of the Rainbow Serpent and I think about Aboriginal culture and traditions, if I can stop tripping over my tongue and my words, to me, it would have to be an area of what I call high vibration. For some Aboriginal people, it may have back in the day been sacred ground or ceremonial ground. I don't know that because I've certainly have not had that information come to me. But the bottom line is I also realise, because I'm an old girl now, I'm an old chook, and I actually remember that many, many years ago, back I think it was the 1980s or 1990s, that there were a lot of people from this area that relocated further north. So maybe this land is just lying there stagnant now. But either way, the reality is that for people like Glenn to be able to go in there and mine the ore and remove it, they have to make application, they have to be given permission. We have something that is called native title. It gets put towards the local Indigenous groups, and they are paid, I believe, and I welcome Glenn correcting me on this. I'm actually giving Glenn the right to view this and listen to it before I actually publish it. And if I've made any incorrect statements, I'll put an extra slide at the end of it. So don't forget, I've got timing chapters in the description, so you can jump to that if you're listening to this. Anyway, where I'm going with this is I think they get paid royalties as well. So whatever Glenn pulls out the ground, and the other two guys with the leases, they have to pay royalties, I believe, to the local group annually for the right to be able to bring this ore and sell it, if you like. So where there is a potential controversy, it's kind of sorted out through these actions. They get compensated for it, which is a good thing, really. And the other thing too, I think if there's, for me, when I was looking at this, and I'm very transparent, I would like to think that Glenn is able to cope with these kind of conversations and not be offended. I also question the morality of removing it, because I think that it's a sacred ground. And then for me, it's like, well, you know what? The bottom line is, if this stuff is sitting there on the ground, not being used, when the local groups are no longer interested in it and they don't follow their cultural traditions and they don't do their ceremonies and that kind of stuff, this stuff is going to waste, you know? And I actually feel that it is such an amazingly incredible crystal that it's better for it to actually be broken up and given to people so that people can access it. It's that case of, you know, if you're not going to go to Rome, let Rome come to you. That's not the correct saying, but I can't remember what it really is. But if you get my drift. So I actually don't personally have a conflict with it. What I do have a little bit of a conflict of, and I think that it would be fair to warn people about this, is I did contact Glenn. I sent him an email just before I started this video. There's a pause there. That's the pregnant pause. And the ethical conflict for me is because I have learned that there is people that are actually going onto the sites. I don't know which mine site it is, but they must be stealing it. There's no way around it. And selling it locally. And the people that are buying it can't possibly know, if they are in the metaphysical community, that what they're buying is basically stuff being sold on the black market. Because if it's sold on the black market and we're into energy, that means, for want of a better description, you're buying stuff with bad juju. Okay, so buy from the appropriate sources would be my advice. So I thought I would put these images in here, which are poached off Glenn's website as well, as part of helping people to understand the feel, you know, the sensory experience of what Mookaite represents, because you can call it Mookaite or Mookaite or whatever. But you can see here that there is the dry. You've got the stuff sitting on the surface. You've got, when the rains come through, look at that stunning image, you know. That, to me, would be the peak to go and visit it when it looks like that, with that beautiful pink sunset and all the colours reflecting off the earth, and you've got some water and all of that. Anyway, going back to it, Mooka Creek, as I said before, is what Mookaite is named after. Now, I have got a little bit of an issue with the pronunciation, because it occurred to me, because I've been around Aboriginal people, and I did send an email through to Glenn, but I haven't got clarification on this. I'm actually wondering if what I'm now pronouncing as Mooka Creek is actually called Mooka Creek by the locals, because we're lazy speakers, all right? You know, as Australians, we're lazy speakers, and because it is apparently an Aboriginal name, they don't tend to pronounce the double O like that as a moo. But what I got from Glenn is that he actually does call it Mooka himself, as in that pronunciation. And it seems like Mooka is what has been adopted globally, really. But to me, there's a room for error there. And I'll explain to you why. It's about the pronunciation and the use of letters, okay? So when we look at Uluru, you can see Uluru is spelled with the letter U all the way through. Uluru, right? It's got a U. When it's a double O, certainly with the double O at the beginning of a word, it is Guri. Okay, so I'm not even going to try and pronounce it and run it together fast. The only time there is an exception, as I understand this, is when you've got the double O at the end of the word, like Wooraloo, which has got the W sound with a double O at the beginning, and then when you get to the end of it, when it's got the double O, then it can become an oo sound, if that makes sense. So I think actually, realistically, it was the Mooka back in the day, not in modern history. And this is because having grown up and spent so much time in these areas, I can almost hear people turning around and saying, "Where'd you get that rock?" "Oh, down at the Mook," right? "Oh, the Mook, you got yourself a little bit of Mookaite." You know what I mean? That's where I think the name has come from. But these days, we actually know it as Mookaite. Well, actually not with an R. I'll try and say Mookaite. So back to my interaction with Glenn. We reconnected because I sent him an email. I'd seen a couple of products online in the process of making this video that I thought just didn't sit right. One is that I've never seen green Mookaite, and I thought, is this fraud? You know what I mean? Is this false advertising? It's coming off a website in India. I'm going to ask Glenn. The other one was, obviously they keep calling it jasper, which really gets up my nose, whatever. And the other thing was, I became concerned that perhaps the tumbles that I'd bought from China were actually fake or fraudulent, you know. By the way, I don't think that there is any Mookaite that's fraudulent or faked. There's not the demand for it. Either way, Glenn did confirm to me that yes, you can get Mookaite that is green. I can't find the image that I was actually looking at when I contacted him, but it was on an Indian website. This was just one I've drawn off Google. And he also said that as far as buying stuff from China, yes, he actually sells a lot of his stuff to China for carving. So what we get out of China is perfectly legitimate. I forgot to mention on the previous slide, Glenn did assure me that when it comes to green Mookaite, that it is actually very rare. Although you can get it, it's not commonly found, which is great to know. I forgot to mention on the previous slide, Glenn did assure me that when it comes to green Mookaite, that it is actually very rare, although you can get it. So just to clarify, I've put these images up so you can actually see what Glenn's works or diggings look like for you. And I've got to be clear, I'm not being paid to promote Australian Outback mining or anything like that, but that's the name of his company, and I understand that he sells some of his items, not in a big way, but he will sell some of his finds on a website called Gemstone Geeks, which is actually where I've managed to pinch a lot of these photographs, including these ones here. Now have a look at the size of that sphere that Glenn is holding there. Goodness gracious. Oh, I'm moving on. That's the kind of stuff that I looked at, and this is why I say, you know, at the end of the day, I'm a little bit of a crystal licker. I'm not actually a licker, so you know what I mean? But I look at something like that and I start to drool, I think. So anyway, yes, I'm not paid to promote it. I'm just sharing the information for those people that are interested. You can learn more about it by going and visiting his website. So as always, I've had to stop and start with the recording of this video. So I do apologise if there's a difference in volume, voice control, whatever. That's what it's about. You know, I've had to do that stop and start. But anyway, getting back to the video content and mineral information, just to summarise here, Mookaite is also known as Mook Jasper or Australian Jasper, but it is absolutely not a jasper. Okay, now as Glenn told me, he's one of the people that refers to it as Mookaite, as I just did, as opposed to Mookaite. Now that's probably because us Aussies are fairly lazy speakers. I think everybody knows that. And frankly, to be honest, I actually think that the pronunciation should be Mookaite. But I'm going to go with the basically the consensus that everybody calls it Mookaite, because this is what it's becoming known by, and I only believe that it should be called Mook because of course I've had so much contact with Aboriginal folk over the years. But anyway, looking at the content here and the mineral information that I've managed to put together, you can see that it's not a jasper. It is basically from the porcelainite radio Laurite family, if I've got the pronunciations correct there. It's definitely a mix of it. Now, apparently the radio Laurite is the white bits, and if you put that under a microscope, apparently they can find little skeletal structures of insects that have obviously been part of the formation of the rock. So we could fairly safely assume from that perspective that we're looking at something that's a bit of a fossil, really. Now, the other little bit of information, just a couple of tech bits here. Before I do that, though, I've got to remind people I am absolutely not a geologist. I have no formal qualifications when it comes to making assumptions about or speaking with any authority about any crystal or rock, but I have done my research, and sometimes there's debate anyway. And either way, coming back to the Mookaite, it has secondary, I'm not quite sure of the word, I've forgotten what the word is, but if you've got the porcelainite and radiolite being the primary substance or material of Mookaite, the secondary ones are what is called opalite or opaline effect, and it has a, if my pronunciation is correct, a chalcedonic effect as well. So a chalcedony, from what I recall, is basically where you've got a little bit of a cave, I think sometimes, but I could be incorrect about that. You're welcome to add your contributions and correct me. Now, I wanted to make a mention too of the other inclusions that we get in or with Mookaite, okay, and that's to do with the colouring. First of all, obviously the opaline effect or the opalite effect is what gives it this transparency that you can see in this image here, which is actually one of Glenn's and presumably one of his hands holding onto this little sample specimen that you see here. There's a light behind it and you can see that it actually shines through the white, and so therefore a lot of people such as myself, I was not aware until I was doing this video that there is actually translucency to it. Not with all forms of Mookaite, by the way, but going back to the colouring, you can see, yes, it's vari-coloured. It's got the creams, the browns. The cream, of course, is the radiolite, as far as I know. You've got greys, yellows, orange, reds, purple, reds, yellow, mauves, and green. And according to Glenn, the green is actually far more rare. It's very scarce, even within all the Mookaite deposits. Now, what I did learn from going onto one of the websites is that when it comes to the colouring of it, it is the limonite inclusions, is that what you would call it, that gives the yellows. Let me just check my notes. Yes, it is the limonite that gives the red and the yellow tones, while the hematite that is in the soil around it is what gives it the reddish brown and the purple tones, which of course this is what people think is hematite. Now, the other thing I asked Glenn, I'm just looking at my notes again, is that, you know, because I was a little concerned that I'd bought mine from China, and I think it's quite cheap actually, considering that there is only one location in the world that you can actually source this stuff, which we've already discussed, at Mooka Creek in Carnarvon, West Australia, or outside of it. There's one location in the world, and then within that location the green is super rare as well, so it is really cheap considering the scarcity of it. The stuff that you see in the smaller image, that's what's called brecciated. I think that's how you pronounce that word as well. Brecciated if I can speak, Mookaite. And as you see, it's just absolutely lovely the way it's formed. It almost looks like a mosaic. It's nature's miraculous mosaic as far as I'm concerned. Now, one of the things that Glenn has clarified for me, because I didn't realise that he was actually a mine owner, one of the few that are licensed to actually get it, was, oh dear, I'd heard that there was somebody that was actually able to provide cheap, you can see how uncomfortable I am about this, cheap Mookaite that was apparently Aboriginal. Now, when I first heard this, I had alarm bells go off because of the cultural implications. My understanding, having spoken to a lot of Aboriginal people, having had friends and hit on them to bring me home pretty coloured stones from their sacred spaces or just wherever they're allowed to go that I'm not, they will all absolutely refuse because it's bound by spiritual law according to them. And so they will not take stones from the ground in which they lay. You will have heard of Uluru. They've now banned a lot of tourists because some of the rocks were being picked up and taken away. They're supposed to be custodians and caretakers of the land, and they take that fairly seriously, a lot of them. But anyway, where I'm going with this is just be mindful when you're doing your purchasing that you're getting it from the right sources. I don't know if that's a true story, but the bottom line is, as Glenn pointed out, if anybody is selling it cheaper or is not a verified supplier or whatever, the chances are that this stuff is stolen. And you can actually see when you go to the tourist sites of the Carnarvon Shire, they actually say that fossicking is illegal in these areas because these guys have had to pay a lot of money to be able to dig up the ore and to sell it on to you guys. And the other thing is that the local Indigenous, they actually approve it. It's all part of native title. They have approved for the mining to occur because they actually get paid royalties from it, okay? And as far as I know, if an Aboriginal was going in there and pinching stuff and on-selling it, not only would there be the legal ramifications from Western law, shall we say, or Australian law, and breaches there, but I know most Aboriginal folk that I've met would be very, very concerned about spiritual law and justice or tribal justice and that kind of stuff, because that still can happen in the communities. I say can, it just would depend. But either way, I'd be very cautious. I say to people, if you've watched my lapis videos, I'm like, if you're buying it from Afghanistan, do not buy it. You know what I mean? Like, ethically, my conscience, I would not buy it because I would be concerned about the retribution on the people that are actually bringing it out and smuggling it. And so it's the same case here for me as far as Mookaite is concerned. Now, obviously, I always give you buying tips when I'm making these videos, and that's based on my information. You might have more knowledge, more understanding, more tips yourself that you're invited to share with us. But the information that I've got right now is just beyond the normal. If you're buying online, make sure that you try and get a really good look at the product that you're buying. As you've seen with some of the images that I've put up from Glenn, because he's a prospector and he does the cutting and that kind of stuff, a lot of these people will sell slices of material, and you can't tell it's actually a slice until you've seen it all around. And if you were hoping for something with a bit of substance to it, then the chances are you're going to be thoroughly disappointed by getting a sliver. So I recommend that you ask for a photograph on all sides of it. You get to know the dimensions, which is, of course, how wide is it, how tall is it, how thick is it, and know the weight as well. And if you're buying it from overseas, make sure you do your currency conversion and all of that, because it might look like a good deal, but if you're buying off a platform and when you've added in your freight, as I found out the hard way, it cost me like $50 to get a tumble stone sent over from the US. It was the most expensive tumble stone I've ever bought in my life, but I clicked the pay button before I realised. Anyway, whatever. Just be aware of those things. But as far as are there fakes around of Mookaite? Apparently not. I think it would be difficult to fake anyway, but I think at the moment we're pretty well safe on it. The only thing that I would point out to you is image A, which I think is just plain horrendous. I found that on an Indian website. It's not a fake, it is legitimate. It's just a whole bunch of Mookaite chips that obviously they must be a business that does carvings, and so this is the offcuts, I guess. And I guess this is just another way of using the product and not wasting any. So they've turned it into a sphere by the looks of it, and then put it in whatever it is, that resinous stuff. You may as well say a bit of plastic, really. I think it's horrendous, actually, but each to their own. Somebody might think it's beautiful. What I do like about the supplier, though, of Igave is that they actually clearly outlined that it was in a resinous material. So they're not doing anything fake there. It's just not particularly attractive. I think it would look much better, actually, if they used those chips and put them into some kind of delicate mosaic. Maybe the lid of a tarot box or something like that would be a suggestion. What else can I say here? Just that obviously the ones in purple, the purple type ones, I sourced them from Glenn's website, and the central display image I took from a website called the Crystal Council, and I think that's particularly lovely, actually. You can see that it's got the shapes of Mookaite, and then you've got your tumbles, and then they've even done some carvings of skulls. I'm not into skulls personally, but I know that a lot of people are, so I find that interesting. It just supports the fact that, yes, actually you can do carving with the Mookaite. So my interpretation of Mookaite is going to be somewhat different to what you probably will see on other people's sites, and I guess this is because I'm Australian and I've lived in these areas and I've known a lot of Aboriginal people, and I feel that I've obviously connected with the Rainbow Serpent historically, at least the energy of it, through my associations with Aboriginal folk and going into some of these special places, shall we say. So rather than limit Mookaite to being a stone of grounding, I would actually say it is a stone of higher awareness, and I do believe that it's actually associated with the Kundalini. That would be the earth connection, and also serpent-like. I do believe it's also associated with helping a person to know their past life karma and to get release from it if need be. It clearly has the capacity to expand a person's awareness and understanding of life, and to recognise their roles and responsibilities as a human being, and that consciousness, the highest consciousness with this brotherhood and sisterhood of man. I believe it's a crystal that you could include in any rituals or of worship of the Creator. Ceremony, certainly you would be encouraged to have a piece for that. And I would also say, I believe it opens portals and gateways. And this is not because I've tried it with the crystal, it's because I've had that experience, as I said, in an area that was a river mouth. It was an inlet, and the Aboriginal folk had told me that the Rainbow Serpent, this is their belief, actually lived around this river mouth, Cossack actually it was, and was out all around the coastline and that kind of thing. Now, without going too far into that, suffice to say that I had an experience on the coastline that was very, very significant, and I would say it was portals and gateways. I'm not going to talk about it too much now because this video is getting very long, but I would also say that it is a crystal that if you're looking to connect with the earth, the nature spirits, Gaia, Mother Nature basically, and the Devas, this would be the crystal that would be able to help you do it, and probably quite strongly, I would think, to really cement that connection. Scooting along, and very quickly because this video is getting so long, I would say I did see that there is recommendations for people under the sun signs of Scorpio and Virgo to use Mookaite. Now, as always, I will turn around and say to you, if you feel drawn to it, doesn't matter what your star or your sun sign is. I did question that little bit, why would they pick Scorpio and Virgo? Well, probably there is that aspect where we're talking about Rainbow Serpent energy anyway, which is the Scorpio, of course, is a water sign. The Virgo is very earth-based. That's definitely Rainbow Serpent stuff. But, you've got other star signs or sun signs that are both earth and water as well. But I would also say that it's also associated with fire and air too. So what I've done here is create a whole list of what I believe to be the spiritual metaphysical benefits for people. I'm not one of those. I'm not going to spend a lot of time talking about this, okay? Just simply that these are things that you could try it with. Now, I would say where you will see on other websites or see what other people have got to say, there is a belief that if you want to work with, say, strength or stepping in your personal power, which actually would be something that I haven't put on here. As I said, there is so much involved that I believe you can get from Mookaite. It's just such an incredible crystal. But either way, I'm not one of those that says you need to use the yellow part of Mookaite and put that onto your solar plexus and that's the only area it's going to work on. I believe because Mookaite carries the energy of the Rainbow Serpent, it doesn't matter what colour part of the Mookaite that you've got, it's going to work for all of the chakras and balancing of the aura, cleansing and the whole lot of it. Just put it out there and invoke, really, to use it. Now, just a little tidbit here as well. When we talk about the Rainbow Serpent, I'm going to give you that I consider to be interesting comparison, which is when we talk about the Irish cultural heritage, we refer to the rainbow as well. There is the rainbow associated with that. That's the Rainbow Kingdom, the fairies, the elves, all of that kind of stuff. And I believe that's the same with the Celtic folk too. When we talk about angels, we also refer to the rainbow. We call it the Rainbow Bridge. I've even noticed that, there's, I've forgotten the name of it. Even within the Egyptian countries, shall we say, the Arabic nations, there is a reference I found at one point in time that refers to the Rainbow Kingdom as well. And when we talk about the Hindus and I was going to mispronounce that, the Veds, an Indian pulled me up, an Indian lady on that. She said, they're not Vedas, they're Veds. I was like, okay, I'll remember that. Well, of course, when we talk about the Veds, they refer to the rainbow differently. They call it the seven horses, which is to do with light, which is just quite interesting anyway. The other thing to be aware of too, I'll just make note of this one, is when we talk about worship and ceremony, we're talking about dance and movement and getting the body active as well. I believe because it's got the fossil elements to it, it's going to be able to help a person to access their ancient ancestral wisdom. I can see and understand that with these attributes that you can actually get in and access some past life memory for healing if there's that going on. If you're trying to connect with animals and have that animal communication or even telepathy, you could attempt to develop any of these by using Mookaite. It's an amazing crystal. So now we come to the physical metaphysical benefits. What a gobful. Okay, so this I took from another site, another person's experience, or more than one person actually. It's a compilation of people's experiences or claims. Now, from my perspective, I'll do that big disclaimer up the top, which is there is no evidence to support that any crystal will actually create a physical healing for you. However, you could use it in conjunction with your current medical treatment plans. So on here you see a list of conditions that people may be suffering from or might need some help with, and you could use your Mookaite and just see if there's a change or if things benefit. You've got nothing to lose by giving it a go anyway, especially if you only buy a little bit. You only have to buy a tumble. You don't have to buy a great big ball like what Glenn has got. Excuse my telephone. Yes, anyway, I'll move on from that. And as far as my approach to the emotional attributes goes, it's pretty well the same as the physical, which is I haven't tested it all out, but to me it actually seems very rational that it will have these attributes, which is certainly the mood balancing and stability and bringing greater happiness and joy in. But please, look, if you've used it, please leave a comment and let us know. The dog is going to play up now. I cannot believe this. I've been trying to finish this all day, and now that I'm motivated to do it, of course, the whole world is starting to get busy around me. Anyway, yes, please review this slide at your leisure. So my apologies, many stops and starts in this video. Sometimes that happens, okay? But back to Mookaite and now talking about the chakras. The bottom line is you will see online, and I have seen online, where some people will say that you should use perhaps the yellow part of Mookaite over your yellow chakra. Now, from where I sit, Mookaite in its entirety carries the energy of the Rainbow Serpent, so therefore it wouldn't matter if you only had yellow. You could put that on your crown chakra if that's what you're into, because you're tapping into that energy of the serpent. Now, just a little bit of tidbit here as well. You would be able to use Mookaite if you're into the gridding. You could put that at your feet and at your crown chakra as well. If you were looking to awaken the Kundalini chakra, you could also put that at the base of the feet and focus your intent that way. Now, speaking about the rainbow, I just thought I would make mention, I can't remember if I mentioned it before, but interesting cultural correlations, shall we say, that where the Aboriginal folk talk about the Dreamtime and the Rainbow Serpent, the Irish and the Celtic talk about the Rainbow Bridge to the Fairy Kingdom, and then other people make reference to the Rainbow Bridge to the Celestial or the Angelic Kingdom. Either way, it's to do with balancing and aligning all of the chakras and purifying the aura, and you would be able to use Mookaite to do that. So as far as uses go, I've already discussed the fact that yes, you could use Mookaite in gridding, but you could also use it as a jewellery item, a pendant. You could wear it as a tumble in a pouch. If you're lucky enough to have one of the spheres or one of the polished shapes or whatever, you could use that in meditation by holding it to access the energy, the healing energy as well. If you've got a large slab as well, you might even have it in the environment. You could even use them as bookends on your bookshelves or whatever. But an interesting one that I thought of after speaking with Glenn, he told me that he actually sends some of his Mookaite to the US, where they use it in napping, which is actually like making flint blades and knives, as they would have done hundreds of years ago or whatever. And so one of the things that crossed my mind with that is if you're into things like psychic surgery, or using ritual tools or whatever, you could get the wands made with the knife tip, if you like, made of Mookaite as well. That would be an interesting way to use it. And of course, yeah, you can have the beads. The beads are very popular as bracelets and necklaces because you can have beads of different colours on the one strand. From a messenger perspective, if you're new to the channel, you won't know that obviously when I provide services to people, sometimes I will, and I've got a bowl of crystals. I don't actually have Mookaite in the moment, or Mookaite in the bowl currently, but I will be putting it in there. But the bottom line is people put their hand in, they draw out a crystal, kind of a bit like a lucky dip. Now, if they were to draw out Mookaite, I'd be saying to them it's time to purify their aura and chakras and to really work on creating and solidifying a firm connection to the Creator, the God, whatever you want to call them, to work on that and also focus on connecting to your spirit guides and guardians, and with a recommendation that maybe it's time to spend some time near water, whether it be a lake, a beach or a river mouth, as discussed, as part of restoring and rebalancing their emotional state so that they can get peace of mind and peace into their soul and get that head clear so that they're able to work on the opportunities that present to them. They can recognize them, and this whole underlying reminder, you are far more capable than what you think you are. You are much more than what you are, and your options are unlimited. It's simply a case of aligning will and working towards the dream. So when we talk about Mookaite and caring for it, I'm not going to discuss in this video how you can care for it metaphysically, because I've got a whole video dedicated to this, and also because the video is getting long. If you've got questions, ask. Suffice to say, from a general care perspective, Mookaite isn't particularly fragile if you were to compare it to something like jasper, although it is a bit more brittle. Now, so that kind of means that it's not easy to damage or break. Excuse my dog now on the squeaky toy. He's having an absolute fun day. Anyway, I can break a Tibetan tektite, and they're supposed to be very hardy, but that's because they're a bit glassy. And I think for some of the Mookaite, it is a little on the glassy side. So if it were to drop, it probably would break and fracture. So yeah, you would just be mindful of that you try and avoid dropping it. And this is a bit of a habit for me and probably other women, where we tuck a piece into our bra, we forget about it, we go for a shower, and all of a sudden it just hits the floor. And that's what happened to my Tektite. I did that a couple of times. I would also discourage people from leaving their Mookaite out on windowsills and things like that. And that's because if you look at the photographs, while Mookaite does appear from those photographs in their natural placement to retain a certain amount of colour, the brilliance of the colour is beneath the surface with those boulders deep down. And if they've got that opalite tinge to it, well, I already know I've seen beautiful opalite that just becomes faded and really yucky looking from exposure to the harsh Australian sun. So I would be avoiding that where possible. So my friends, as promised, after creating this video, I actually gave a copy through to Glenn, clearly because obviously he's the mine holder and I've talked about him a lot, and I want to make sure that there was no incorrect statements in what I put forward here. So bottom line is, I did promise that I would come back with any corrections. So I'm re-recording this final slide to let you know, yes, I did make one mistake. Glenn has said that he's been the leaseholder of his mine for so many years now that he actually had it before native title legislation came into place. So that information is, as far as native title, I can't even speak, and royalties go, that's current information, but it doesn't actually apply, from what I understand, to Glenn and the miners of Mookaite, because they've all had their tenements so long. He actually has also told me that there's only the 3 leases as previously discussed, but they're not really being terribly worked at the moment. So the bottom line is, Mookaite is extremely rare. It's actually very powerful, and I would encourage most people to grab a bit when they can. I certainly will be. I'm going up to visit Glenn actually tomorrow morning. Well, not too early in the morning, it's a bit of a drive, but I'm going to catch up with him and take a look at the stuff that he's got in his shed, because he actually, I saw on his website, he's got things like tiger iron, which I've got a video coming out about that next week. These are Australian crystals. I actually didn't realise that a lot of the stuff that I like is actually only in Australia, and certainly Western Australia's got a lot. But either way, yes, Glenn's got some chrysoprase, stuff like that, all my beloved crystals, because they have such glorious colours. So I'm going to catch up with him, excuse me, and if I've got any more corrections to make, I'll make them in this Sunday's yarning video. But either way, if you're interested in finding out about my experience when I go and meet Glenn and take a look at some of his stuff, by all means watch this Sunday's yarning, because I definitely will be referring to it. This is one of those experiences that I love and enjoy. Now, just that's basically it for today, but I just wanted to say thank you, not just thank you for being part of my journey. This particular video has been a bit of a stretch for me. I don't feel that it's actually been my best performance to date, and I don't know if there was a certain level of emotional investment in it for me. I'm not sure if it was because of my dear little Toby, who's sleeping right now, which is a bonus. I might try and do some more recordings in a moment. But either way, I do apologise for the quality, and I would also say thank you very much for being part of my journey. For now, I'm going to love you, leave you, take care, have a blessed day, wonderful day. I'll catch you in the next video. Bye bye for now.